All right, last but not least, this is the last chapter, you guys. Chapter 18 talks about treatment. Okay, so we're not gonna go too in depth into this either, but I definitely want to touch on a couple of things. One, you got to have treatment goals. Okay, so they talk about, is your treatment goal going to be abstinence, meaning no use whatsoever, or is it going to be controlled use? So a lot of people, obviously, who are having substance use issues, this is going to sound crazy, but a lot of times it's much harder for them to do controlled use than to do abstinence, because for a lot of these people, it's an addiction, it's a disorder, and once they take that first, whatever it is, drink, drag, pill, whatever it is, it's almost impossible to come back from that. So for a lot of people, abstinence is the way to go, because they figure don't even want to tempt themselves. Alcoholics Anonymous is huge, and that's one of the biggest organizations that, tries to help with treatment. And obviously, there's not just Alcoholics Anonymous, there's Narcotics Anonymous, there's you can go to all different types of meetings. We just mostly tend to talk about AA because that's probably the most common, and that's kind of where everything originated. It started all the way back in 1935, so it's been around a long time. It is kind of centralized around a Christian type philosophy. There's 12 steps that they work through, and basically, kind of the idea is, as they work through those, it's almost like a counseling, process. And they go through, some of the steps that you have to apologize to people and things like that. So for the most part, pretty successful. I want to see if it gives you. I was looking earlier for statistics, and I don't think. Only statistic it really tells you is there's about 1.3 million members in the U.S. and Canada. Um, it does say that there hasn't been a lot of evaluations over AA, and the ones that there have been haven't been super positive. But it says, like, if they compared the court-ordered AA to other types of interventions, they haven't really seen AA to be more effective. I think the idea, though, is that AA was definitely developed to reach out more towards people who had made the decision themselves. So it's kind of like we say about any type of treatment. If the person doesn't want to get better and the person doesn't really want help, then it's probably not going to work. Whether it's therapy, whether it's an AA meeting. Basically, the bottom line is people have to want to get better or change. So I think that's probably one of the big issues, is that a lot of people that end up in AA aren't going there by their own accord. It would be interesting to see a study done where just people who had chosen AA and then kind of look at their results. They also have what's called motivational enhancement therapy, where it talks about stages of change. And you kind of go through these 4 stages. It's pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And those are pretty much basically what they sound like. You're gonna start to think about making a change. You might know there's a problem or think that there's a problem. Trying to figure out how you're gonna solve it. Actually deciding to make that change and preparing yourself to do so. The actual action of it. So whether that's going to a meeting or going to a therapist, or getting maybe even medication in some certain circumstances. And then that maintenance is that part where you try not to, obviously, what some people call fall off the wagon, or relapse in any way. A lot of people like contingency management. Again, you're going to get some controversy about that, but contingency management basically is kind of like based on an operant conditioning type situation, or where you're getting rewards. So it talks about like a voucher system. So a lot of times in rehab facilities, if you behave the correct way, or you don't, you don't relapse, or you do the right things and you go to your therapy, you get rewarded somehow. So sometimes like maybe it's you get a leave for the day, or maybe it's you just get a nice meal or a different meal than everybody. It could be a lot of different things, but it's some type of voucher type system where you get goods for your vouchers, and the way you get vouchers is behaving in the appropriate way. So in this sense, not using drugs and alcohol, or whatever it is that you're trying to overcome, whatever addiction it is you're trying to overcome. Um, so just to give you an example, after, let's see, they did study on some participants. They had to attend a therapeutic workplace for 3 hours a day during the work week. So when they came to work, they had to give a urine sample. Okay? If it was negative, then they were allowed to stay. After the first shift, they got a $7 voucher on the first day. Then every day after that they were drug free, it went up by 50 cents to a maximum of $27 per day. If they got a positive urine sample, or didn't come to the workplace, then they had to go back to the beginning at $7. Um, they worked on basic skills, all this kind of stuff. So basically, over 6 months, their maximum they could get was $4,030. And it said 40% of the participants um, had drug-free results, and 75% on 75% or more of the testing occasions. Whereas in the control group, which didn't get to participate in any of this, only 10% did. So what that would tell us is that these types of programs would be should be very beneficial. They also talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral theory. And cognitive, whenever we talk about cognitive, we're always talking about what's happening in our brain, and basically trying to look at training cognitive skills, thinking skills, what's happening inside of our head, and working through therapy that way, and kind of connecting what's going on in our head with our actual behavior. So if we train ourselves to think a certain way, then our behavior will coincide with that. In regards to the medicine, you guys had to answer some questions about that. We're not going to go too in depth, but it's interesting that there are different medicines that can be paired with certain things. Like there's certain medicines that they'll give alcoholics sometimes that if they take a drink of alcohol, it makes them very, very sick. So sometimes in severe cases, obviously the idea is you don't ever want to give anybody medication that you don't have to. Like you don't. The goal is never medication. You don't want to be putting substances into somebody unless it's a necessity. Ideally, you want therapy, and therapy is probably the number one best way, because therapy is going to get down to the roots of the problem usually. And usually if there's drug use going on, there's something else happening. There's a reason. And so usually therapy is going to be the only thing that's going to maybe get down to that reason, and maybe be able to actually fix that person's thought process, and how they're responding to whatever that is, and then actually change their mentality into to where maybe they don't feel like they need to drink, or maybe they don't feel like they need to do drugs. But having said that, sometimes there are very severe cases, and when therapy takes time, and so in the immediate sense, a lot of times we need some of these medicines to help. So like I said, maybe an alcoholic is going to be given some type of medicine that if they take a drink, it's going to make them very, very sick. We've already talked about there's medicines where if you're having a heroin overdose, they can give you medicine that will counteract those issues, so that it doesn't affect their body in that moment. They also have things that we've kind of talked about before within the different subjects where they have drugs that are similar to what the illegal drug is, but maybe act at a lower level. So maybe they'll kind of wean people off of something like heroin or cocaine by trying to use a synthetic medication where they'll be able to reduce doses slowly instead of just totally making somebody go cold turkey. But you have a list in your book, so you can look at like the specific ones that go with this specific substance. You know, what are the specific medications? And it kind of tells you what they do. So sometimes it's going to affect the, you know, neurotransmitter, like, or the actual receptors of the neurotransmitter. So the GABA receptors or the, you know, serotonin, something to do with serotonin or dopamine. Nicotine, you guys know there's a ton of different things out there for nicotine. There's gum, there's patches, there's for people who they feel like their addiction is maybe more conditioned, like classical conditioning. So it's something where they want to have something in their hand or they want to be doing something, or it's an oral type thing where they need something in their mouth. Those people might choose to do something like the gum, or they might choose to do something like an electronic cigarette, so that they're still doing that motion and they still feel like they're having that behavior without getting the actual nicotine. If it's an actual nicotine addiction, then again, you might need gum or a patch or something like that that can slowly take you off of that addiction. And then again, there's people who go cold turkey, who completely stop. Something else to think about too is, again, the therapy, and a lot of times the reason people smoke is not because they want nicotine. It's there's something else there. A lot of people who smoke actually want to lose weight. So, you know, there's an issue within itself. Like, again, that's going to take therapy, because the best thing to do is retrain that person's thinking and say, that's not the best way to do that. You know, maybe I should go exercise. Maybe I should eat a healthier diet. Things that are better for us. So, big proponent on therapy. Just a couple of things about the actual, you know, the big picture that I wanted to mention is, let's see, when it talks about admission, I see a little part there for you're going to get, most people get admitted for alcohol, but there's a very young age for people getting admitted for marijuana. Now, again, that might change because our laws might change, but that's something to keep in mind. Let's see. Most people are treated as outpatients in 2011. In the study they did, only 17% were in a residential, meaning actually in a rehab facility. And only 6% were medication assisted programs. So that's some good information. A lot of people, there's a lot of belief that treatment isn't really effective because people tend to relapse. You know, again, and a lot of times what we see is out in the media, so it's maybe we're looking at celebrities or people like that. But again, it's a chronic illness. It's something that is going to persist unless we find the correct way to deal with it. So there's not really a cure. But like I said, the thing we preach the most is the therapy, because if there's some type of issue that's causing these behaviors, a lot of time we can get to it that way. And again, sometimes you are going to have to use medication, because that might, if there's some type of chemical thing happening, that's going to help as well. But let's see. On one of the studies they did, 53 studies of effectiveness of substance abuse treatment for adolescents. Most of them had significant reduction later in life. 32% remained abstinent at the end of the year. So obviously 32% is not a huge percentage, but in the grand scheme of things, that's 32% less people that were addicted later on in life and that were able to perform at a substantial capacity. So when you're talking about something as serious as this, which like we have said is a lot of people consider it a disease, a disorder. I mean, it is a disorder. We have it in the DSM, but it's not something easily overcome. So if you can get 32% back on track, it's not a bad statistic. So keep that in mind. And guess what? No more lectures. You guys are done. We made it through the whole book. And it's been super fun. And I hope you guys all do well on your final. And I'm excited to see how everybody ends up, and your projects have been awesome. So I can't wait to see the end product of your projects.